A very good morning. It's the 1st of October and a brand new month for each one of us. Wherever you are, I hope you are in the best of shapes. This special broadcast we are bringing to you right now is about breastfeeding and medication. And over the next 1 hour, we'll be talking everything that you need to know about breastfeeding and medication. Around half of all women worldwide require medication whilst breastfeeding. Historically, breastfeeding women have been excluded from drug research, largely with the intention of protection from harm. However, a lack of data to inform safe medication use in this population itself brings risks. But what is breastfeeding? It's one of the most effective ways to ensure child health and survival. However, contrary to World Health Organization recommendations, fewer than half of the infants under 6 months are exclusively breastfed across the world. Breast milk itself is the most ideal food for infants. It is safe, clean, and contains antibodies which help protect against many common childhood illnesses. It provides all the energy and the nutrients that the infant needs for the first months of life, and does continue to provide up to half or more of a child's nutritional needs during the second half of the first year and up to a third during the second year of life. I'm Chris Higgin, and this morning I'm joined by experts from the Infectious Disease Institute who will be helping us understand why you need to take all the precautions that you ought to take and also have all the information that you need to ensure that breastfeeding and medication is conducted in a very smooth way. On my immediate left, I have Ida Kauma Tusime. She is a pharmacokinetic, pharmacodynamic modular at the Infectious Disease Institute. Many thanks for joining us, Ida.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
On her left is Katrina White, Professor of Clinical Pharmacology and Global Health at IDI. Many thanks for joining us too.
Thank you very much.
And on our extreme left, we have Rita Nachijowa. You are a research coordinator, PhD scholar, milk studies at the Infectious Disease Institute.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Very interesting. Let me stay with you because I had milk studies.
Yes.
What are you studying?
So I'll first explain to our viewers what we mean by milk. So milk stands for maternal, infant, lactation, pharmacokinetic studies.
Okay.
Yes, so basically our studies are in breastfeeding women. And if you hear a breastfeeding woman, it's related to milk. So that's the acronym for our studies.
Okay, it's a very convenient acronym, but of course does delve into the dynamics of exactly what the babies and the mothers are dealing with on a daily basis. But let me also understand, before we delve into the nitty-gritty of breastfeeding and medication, what does IDI being the Infectious Disease Institute, do? Maybe this question can be answered by...
Yes, so the IDI stands for Infectious Disease Institute. This is a not-for-profit organization that is housed within Makerere University. It started in 2002 with the key objective to improve health, the health landscape in Africa. We focus a lot on infectious diseases, primarily started out with focus on HIV, but has since grown into other focus on other infectious diseases. We also have a big portfolio on capacity building, so skilling the next generation in terms of healthcare. And so we have more than 200 projects going on at any one time. And we have over 200,000 persons living with HIV under our care at the Infectious Disease Institute.
Okay. Katrina, you are a professor of global health. And my understanding of the workings of IDI over the last 5 years and in my practice of journalism, there has been a lot of concerted effort and interventions across the country. Does that fit well within the larger aspect of global health?
It absolutely does, because one of the things is we live in a constantly changing landscape. So as Ida's already mentioned, it was the HIV crisis that really led to the inception of the Infectious Diseases Institute. And Uganda has really led the way in bringing down a lot of the rates, such that in many cases, HIV can now be considered as any chronic disease. But along the way, other things start to pop up and you start to see other priorities. So obviously we have regular Ebola outbreaks, viral hemorrhagic fevers within Uganda. Mpox is in the news at the moment.
Yeah.
So we need to take the skills that we have and apply them to whatever is the priority at the moment. And that's something that Infectious Diseases Institute is really extremely strong on.
Okay. All right. Now let's go straight into the nitty-gritty, especially when it comes to breastfeeding and medication. And this is a question that I would love each of you to answer. And let me begin with the milk scholar. Researchers, I know it's very important now that you undertake studies in medicines for breastfeeding. What informs that thrust right now?
So thank you, Chris. So apparently, like any other population, breastfeeding women get conditions that make them require treatment. For example, a breastfeeding woman might get a condition like malaria or tuberculosis, and this will lead them to take a medication. So for the past years, they've excluded breastfeeding women in studies due to the perception that it is risky. But at the same time, we need to get evidence of this medication in this population. So as the milk study, we come up with studies to generate evidence that will that will inform practices about safety of these medications in the breastfeeding women. And that's the milk study standing.
Okay. Katrina?
So one thing that we really try to do is actually get it out into the communities and we find what are women taking. Because as doctors, we can have a guess at what we think the priorities are, but we don't know necessarily about what women are taking over the counter without a prescription. We don't know about herbal and traditional medication. So often we start by asking our communities, what questions do you have? Which medication are you interested in? What are you taking? Then we can take that and we can design the trials and the studies, because there's quite a standard methodology for how we do that. And then when we've done that, we can then go back out into the communities and explain what we've found and what it means. So it's a kind of cyclical process where we take a priority, we answer it, then we go back to the community.
Okay. Let me stay with you briefly before I go to Ida. She is a modular. I don't know exactly how that plays into everything else. But being a professor of global health, I want to understand, you are based in Uganda, right?
Yes, I've lived in Uganda for the last 10 years.
Wow.
I raised my family here and it's very much home.
Does that mean your studies have exclusively been in Uganda, or you've had an opportunity, for example, to benchmark on studies conducted elsewhere before you came to Uganda?
Actually, it's more the opposite. What we're doing here in Uganda is actually benchmarking how people in the rest of the world do things. I believe that for this type of study, the group we have at the Infectious Diseases Institute really is leading the world, because you take some of the high-income countries, women there also need medication whilst breastfeeding, but their formula feeding is more perhaps affordable, feasible, acceptable, sustainable and safe. And so I suppose if there's any doubt, perhaps you might say formula milk could be used. Whereas in Uganda, we're not in that situation. Women need to breastfeed or the babies will get sick and have a higher risk of death. We know that. But women still need to take the medication. So we've built a collaborative network across Africa, but also we're increasingly being invited by colleagues in Europe, North America, to come and talk about our work so they can learn from us. So we are the benchmark in a way.
Okay. Oh, wow, that's very interesting. And of course, that should be something that makes the rest of the scholars undertaking the research very, very proud. Now, Ida, you are a modular. Do I get that right?
Modeler.
Modeler. Okay. In pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamics.
Yes.
That's quite
A mouthful.
What are you up to?
It simply means that the work that we do, so when an individual takes a medication, in this case, a breastfeeding mother,
That's right.
what we are worried about, or what we want to understand and look at, is when this mother takes the medication, some of it will end up in her breast milk.
That's right.
And then when the baby breastfeeds, the baby can end up with amounts of the drug. They can end up with amounts of the drug. So what that modeling does simply means we use mathematics and we use the biology, the science of the maternal body, the body of the baby. We try to predict and quantify how much drug might end up in the infant. And that knowledge is useful to sort of, if we think that these concentrations might be toxic, might give the child side effects, then you might want to adjust the dose that the mother is taking.
Yeah.
Or on the other hand, the baby might be getting concentrations, drug concentrations that are not toxic, but very low. But over time, this repeat exposure to these low concentrations, it might mean that the child might become resistant, what we call resistant to a particular medication. Such that later on, for example, if they get the condition for which the mother was being treated, because they've been exposed to these low concentrations over time, that medication might not work for them. So my whole area of work is to ensure that we take the data that the women come in, Rita makes sure we collect the information, and then we take the information, digest it, and suggest changes to drug dosing if they need to be for the mother or for the baby.
Okay, allow me to stay with you on that, because you speak about data collection in order to inform how you intervene. Now, data collection in this part of the world is really challenging, and many times what you want to occasion in terms of your interventions and medicines and treatment might be affected by the lack of that data coming in sufficient amounts. When you reach that point, what do you do? Because I'm inclined to think that populations, including those in my own district of Butaleja, might be unknown, or the incidence of breastfeeding and the patterns therein might not be sufficiently known to inform how, for example, the Ministry of Health intervenes with regard to breastfeeding mothers in that part of the country. How are you navigating those challenges, especially when it comes to what appears to be data mining?
Okay. So thank you for that question. First of all, you alluded to the fact in the beginning that IDI has a rich network all over the country, and this network has been built over many years in the different spheres of work, so HIV, TB. Secondly, we also have a team of really well-trained researchers. But I want to step back a bit and say, whereas we are researchers, we are also mothers.
Yeah,
Each of us here has breastfed. So when we are designing these studies to collect this data, we know the intricacies, we know the peculiarities, we know how a breastfeeding mother might feel.
That's right.
And so when our most of our nurses are collecting data, we found it very interesting that Katrina talked about the global networks. Many people thought abroad that it was very difficult to collect data in these breastfeeding mothers, but we've shown without a doubt, and that comes from the expertise, that it's actually possible to invite these mothers to educate and say, this is what we want to do, this is how we want to collect our data. And you'll find that they always give us, the mothers are willing to give us their breast milk samples, a sample of their milk. They're willing for us to prick their children and take off some blood. And so I think it has come from, we've been lucky that we have a network in these communities. They trust us as IDI, but we also have researchers who are first and foremost women, and mothers.
Yeah, that's very important.
Yeah.
So when I first came here in 2014, one of the first questions was, are these not a very vulnerable group of individuals? Is it ethically okay to do that work? But also, is a breastfeeding mother and her baby really going to be happy to come up to the clinic, spend time, have samples? And so one of the very first pieces of work we did was actually, Rita, you were involved in that. Yeah, exactly. We asked the women, how did you find being up here? And what we came to discover was that actually this group were more interested in being in studies than many of the other groups, because to them, if you give any breastfeeding mother a medication, what is her first question going to be?
Yeah.
Like, what about my baby? And at the moment we're having to say, well, this is what we know and we think it's okay, but we want to know for certain. And so women actually want to be part of that answer. But the other thing I would say is this, Ida just dropped this word of trust into her last sentence. Establishing that trust is absolutely key. And that's another reason why it's great to talk to you today. And perhaps somebody listening has questions they want to bring to our group. We really want to hear perspectives and be able to help answer your questions.
Okay. Thank you very much for that very interesting perspective. Of course, localization of this information is important to allow for those who need it most to understand it the very best way. And of course, this throws us back to the lady who is undertaking studies in milk.
Yes, please.
What is there's always talk, especially among the younger girls and women, there is a discomfort, I must be very specific, about breastfeeding exclusively for 6 months. They have their reasons and challenges. Some conveniently say the nature of work does not allow them to be able to breastfeed exclusively. But then there are those who are not working and are lucky enough to be under a family setting that allows them to be comfortable without necessarily working. But they still say, I cannot do that exclusively for 6 months. I want you to hammer down that information and give us what the disadvantages are if somebody who can exclusively feed for 6 months chooses not to.
Okay, thank you, Chris, about that. So first of all, if you are a mother, it means you have a husband.
That's right.
I'll take it in this example that as women, we love attention. So we always say our husbands are not giving us attention. So take this that you're doing, if you're denying your baby breast milk or you're not breastfeeding, you're also denying your baby that attention. So all of us here are mothers. When you're breastfeeding your baby, there's that bond that you create with your mother, with your baby. So if you really think that you really don't want to breastfeed your baby, so you're denying your baby that bond, that connection, that love that you would give your baby in terms of breastfeeding. So regardless, because we know that the top notch is that nutrients that we get from breast milk, but take it, if you're out there and you really feel you really don't want to breastfeed, take it that at least give that attention, give that bond, give that relationship from you to your baby, and you can only do that through breastfeeding. Yes, in addition to the nutrients we get when we breastfeed our babies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Aida?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many advantages of breastfeeding, even to the mother.
Yeah.
A mother who's breastfed, so sometimes the ladies say, oh, my breasts will sag. But I always say counter to that is your tummy will slim faster.
More afraid for their bodies than for the baby.
Yes. So if you breastfeed, your tummy actually goes back faster. And for those who have breastfed, when the baby suckles, you actually feel some of the contractions. So I usually say there's something to counter it. But also, it has shown that down the road, for example, children who are breastfed, they do better on some intelligence tests, so many of the intelligence tests.
Yeah.
They are less prone to some of the childhood illnesses. And so think of it as saving you time and money
Cost
in a
of
hospital,
treatment, yeah.
that sort of thing. But also, I just want to encourage those who are working mothers with the advancements now and with a little bit more income, mothers can express their milk. So you may not be able to breastfeed them yourself physically, but you can express your breast milk, and that means you simply, pump it out. And then if you have a refrigerator, if you have a fridge, you keep it there so that when you're at work, for example, I know most for Uganda, I think the law is 3 months leave, such that by the time you go back to work, you have sort of your breast milk stored. And so whoever you leave taking care of the baby can always use your breast milk. So you're not giving them it to the baby physically, but they are getting the milk. So that's also an option that women should explore.
Okay. This next question will go to Katrina and Rita. Let me first begin with Katrina. Across the globe, the spectre of HIV/AIDS is a challenge for all public healthcare systems, but sub-Saharan Africa finds itself in a particularly worrying situation where infrastructure and interventions are piecemeal, often as a result of funding constraints. But when it comes to interventions for mothers who are breastfeeding, we already have what is known as a PCMT.
PMTCT.
PMTC. Thank you for the correction. That one has been very pivotal in ensuring that there is a lesser incidence of transmission of HIV from the mother to the baby. But this opens up my question. When a mother is HIV positive and she has been very religious, especially when it comes to the protocols of breastfeeding, challenges later emerge. I do not know whether Uganda has a particular way of dealing with this, because in our interface before we came on air, you seemed to suggest that Uganda has a certain other way it intervenes, especially on these aspects, than what the WHO recommends. I hope that is right.
So there's a very subtle difference. So a woman living with HIV really must take her antiretrovirals. And all policy everywhere in the world is as soon as you have your HIV diagnosis, you should start treatment the same day for life. Whether you're pregnant, whether you're not, you should just start treatment and stick to it, because that is the best way to suppress your viral load and maintain excellent health. And if you do that, your life expectancy can actually be matched with somebody, your friend, who doesn't have HIV. It is no longer that terrible spectre it once was, but we cannot yet cure. So you must take your medication. Now, for a mother, it's even more complicated because there are two individuals, and transmission can happen during pregnancy or delivery, but whilst you're breastfeeding, there remains a very small risk. If you take your antiretroviral therapy, the risk doesn't go right to zero. There remains a tiny risk, but you must take your medicine. Some of the earlier studies in HIV in Uganda tried to give women formula milk as well as the antiretrovirals, because they thought, well, if she's not breastfeeding, that risk goes to zero. But what we discovered is that the HIV wasn't transmitted in breastfeeding, but the babies died of other things. They died of diarrhea, respiratory tract infections. And there's one paper that says a dead HIV negative infant is still dead. So that's where we have to balance the safe feeding with taking antiretrovirals. The World Health Organization used to say that a woman living with HIV should wean the baby at 1 year. And that's what Ugandan guidelines still say, and that's what we recommend here. Now, actually, recently, the WHO have relaxed that slightly to say that a woman living with HIV on treatment, she should breastfeed the same as anyone else. So that is exclusive for 6 months, as part of their diet up to maybe 2 or 3 years even. Uganda keeps it to 1 year, and that is crisper and it's cleaner. And the reasons being, adherence is difficult postpartum. Your life is going crazy. It's hard to take the tablets every single time. Transmissions do still occur. We don't want that to happen. And we can follow you up much more easily when the system says just stop at that point. So it's a compromise, what we believe to be best for Ugandan women.
Okay. Rita, has research been conducted to allow for mothers in the far-flung areas, especially the rural areas, who might not readily use conventional medicine off the counter, but quickly use or adopt traditional medicines and herbs, so to speak? Are studies looking in that direction, or have you attended particularly to cases like that and have, so if I may use the word protocol, in administering medicine for them?
So apparently there's a trend that drug shops are everywhere. So women can easily go to those drug shops and get what we call over-the-counter medications. But we've always advised women to always ask your healthcare provider. Because yes, we know most drugs are safe, but there are those drugs that you will need more advice from a healthcare provider. There are some drugs where before you take them, you have to get advice from your healthcare provider, either to first stop the breastfeeding or to breastfeed, say, 2 or 3 hours later while you're taking that drug. So this is the problem we have now, that someone just walks onto the counter and gets the drug without getting the prescription or without getting advice from a healthcare provider. So we always advise women, if you are not able to report to hospital, at least give a call to your best healthcare provider to give you advice on any medication.
Okay.
Yes.
But one specific local thing that is quite interesting is many women in pregnancy and breastfeeding, as you may know, they take imumbwa, which is, it's a combination, isn't it? It's not a single thing.
Yeah.
And of course, when you buy it in the market, this is going to sound obvious, but if I go out and I buy some imumbwa down here in Kampala compared to Gulu, it may not have exactly the same composition, but we
And
felt...
those are challenges could come down to toxicity levels.
Exactly.
So actually, we did some work on this. We got a collection of samples, we took them to a laboratory and we measured what was in them. We also co-administered, we took an antiretroviral, gave it together with the imumbwa to rats, and we looked at what happened. And actually, if you're taking dolutegravir or DTG, you may know it as, do not take imumbwa because it can bind to the drug. It can mean that you don't get as much into your body. So please, I know there's a lot of cultural beliefs, and I know the pressure also from relatives and extended community can be high. But if you're on ARVs particularly, please don't take these herbal things without knowing exactly what's in it, because it could mean that your treatment doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay. It could be complicating things that you're supposed to be rectifying.
Exactly. You're doing what you believe to be best for your baby, but actually, in that case, it might not be the best thing.
Yeah.
All right, so how are you incorporating, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to stay on that particular issue for a while, how are you incorporating traditional birth attendants in the villages? Because they do attend to most of these mothers, even after they've given birth. The reason I want us to dwell on it is because these women are believed religiously more than the doctor who comes clad in a coat. And then that poses a challenge. For example, if somebody has had 4 babies and their consultation has been with a traditional birth attendant, and here you are on their 5th, you come in with a clinical coat and you're speaking conventional medicine and all these other things, there is always a point of conflict or even dismissal of what you're saying on account that this has been successful over the years. Why do you think it's not going to be successful for this other one?
So I could start. We always tell our breastfeeding women that every child is different and every pregnancy is different. So you might have succeeded while taking herbal medicine or any concoction on the other babies, but now this is special. So all we do is to give them the right information. And I've come to realize that through our community engagements, the traditional herbalists are well versed. They are aware. Because they've been ongoing awareness, the trainings through them. So you might find that they ask these women, which other drug are you taking? Like how Professor Katrina says, if you are really taking, let me say, an antiretroviral drug, at the same time you're taking your concoction, they really ask them those questions to make sure that there are no interactions. Of course, I admit that they are those that they may not ask. So our role is to keep health educating our women that, look here, it's good, our grandparents have taken these herbal medications, but you didn't know the infections they had, or they were not taking the medication that you're taking. But if you're taking a medication for a certain condition, it's not good to mix the two. Yes, because of the problems that may come with the liver problems, the contraindications and the toxicity that we've talked about. So yes, you give that information and then you leave the lady to make an informed decision.
You pray.
Yeah.
She makes the informed decision.
I just wanted to add on to what Rita said. So the IDI, we have what we call community advisory boards, and the milk study engages one of them. So there's a group of people who really come from the community. So we get a representative from the church, from the mosque, from the youth. And when we are designing our studies, we bring them on board. They come to the IDI, we sit and talk and say, look, this is how we plan to implement. And then they will say, that you need to change that. That might not be possible. So the fact that we have these members from the community means that our studies are that we have the community in mind when we design and plan to implement them. Also, we have what we call peer mothers on our team. These are women who are living, for example, with HIV and are peer to another woman in a similar situation. So it's interesting that what a mother might not disclose to the doctor, they will disclose to the peer mother. So the peer mother is very approachable, and so she bridges that gap.
I mean, yeah, sometimes friendship and peerage does break down walls that the expert cannot.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's interesting that what the doctor will miss as we are patients are waiting, as these women are waiting to see their doctor, or the peer mother engages, and then she can always come back and fill in the gap and say, that mother is non-adherent. This might be the problem. This mother is like this. So we've really set in place the fact that we have community advisory boards and peer mothers. It helps to improve our engagement with the community.
Okay. Katrina?
And I would say, because one of the things we want to do as a group is really to make what we're doing really clear in a way that people can understand and the people that need to know. And so that's why we have different social media channels. We have an engagement program called Attaining Equity of Access to Research, which is a mouthful. So we shorten it to At the Equator. And what we aim to do is we aim to actually go out and talk to VHTs, talk to the traditional birth attendants, actually produce things that they'll find helpful, short 1 to 2 minute video clips, community events, even drama, dance. We've just published a paper where the authors include the film producer, an artist, and the head of the drama team. Because what we're trying to do is develop interactive methodologies, because we don't want to tell people like, you are wrong, you must do it our way. That's not it. It's about a conversation. It's about understanding. And if they've got questions, maybe a traditional birth attendant can come to us and say, can you help us produce some messaging on this or that? So we're trying to build those partnerships across disciplines, get out of the clinics and the hospitals and into the villages.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. That shows that the Infectious Disease Institute is doing a lot of interventions and attending to engagement mechanisms that allow for local populations to be on board. And that's a very effective way of doing things. I must say congratulations to the team on that aspect. Okay, let me return to the core of breastfeeding. And this is in light the fact that there are so many mothers and young women who are encountering problems down to the fact that they don't have the knowledge. Now, formula and other secondary foods to breast milk are very popular, by the way. There is what appears to be an aggressive marketing strategy by the manufacturers to basically make breast milk secondary instead of primary. And sometimes it's disheartening to know that a mother has started on formula way before the 6 months have elapsed for exclusive breastfeeding. What are the disadvantages of these? And those who engage in it, and they have no choice but to engage in them, how should they go about this?
Thank you, Chris. So people that use formula, really, they have some money, because they are expensive.
It is.
Yes, they are expensive. So I'll give you an example that you need money to buy the formula. So it's expensive. Whereas breast milk is free. Yes. So as a mother, you just need to sit in a comfortable position and give your baby that breast milk. So it is cheap and free. On top of that, as the people that sell formula don't tell you the nitty-gritties of the process of mixing this formula until it gets to the baby. So the process of you getting this formula to the home and to the mixing is long, quite long. You need bottles. So you will find that still these mothers will not have the time to clean these bottles. So you need time to clean these bottles thoroughly well. So in that process, if you really don't clean these bottles thoroughly well, you're exposing the baby to some infections. So we bring in the problem of safety. Yes, it's not just the formula. You need to mix this formula in bottles and then give the baby. I doubt if you give your baby formula for the rest of the day, you bring in a second person. And trust me, it's you, the mother, that you'll have the best interest of your baby. So this other person, the second person you're introducing in, may not have the best interest of your baby. They might be obliged to touch the tip of this bottle. Yes, and that wherever you're bringing in a second person, you're introducing in more infections. Yes, for now, I'll urge my colleagues to add on.
All right.
But we've talked about safety
Safety.
and cheapness, and
I
readily
also-
availability.
Affordability.
Yeah.
I also think I would add that this direct aggressive marketing is unethical. It is wrong, and it actually risks people's lives. It's as serious as that. So I would urge anybody who's thinking of using formula, just think really, really carefully. Yes, actually, for some women, it is the answer. To women that can afford it, can make it up cleanly, sterilize the bottles. There may be other medical reasons. Some women, very few by the way, women say they're not producing enough milk. That is another common thing.
Yeah.
But actually, that's often because you've not got the baby at the breast for long enough, because it's supply and demand. And so as the baby suckles, your body reacts by producing more milk. And actually, breastfeeding a baby is actually a full-time job. That's why women get maternity leave. It's not so you can run around. It's actually so that you can take care of your baby and, really do it. But I would say if you're thinking of formula, be really careful. These people, they don't care about you and your baby. They want to make their profit from their products. So I can't say that strongly enough. I do want to say, if there is an exceptional time when a woman is needing to use formula, I don't want that woman to feel guilt. I don't want that woman to feel ashamed. These things exist because sometimes they're necessary, but your first choice, always persist with breastfeeding. There are lactation consultants around. Naturally Nourish in Uganda is a really good organisation. Our colleague Doreen set that up. She's a medical doctor, but she felt this calling to actually support breastfeeding women. Services are available. So if you're struggling to breastfeed, get in touch with someone that might help you before reaching for that bottle of formula.
Okay. All right. That's something that ought to be taken in exclusively, especially for those that may be grappling with the aspects, including what you want to feed your child. Now, we are, of course, inching further. Just a reminder for those that are watching that this special broadcast is about breastfeeding and medication. And with me here on set, I have Ida Kaumato-Sime. She's a pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic modeler at the Infectious Diseases Institute, as well as Katrina Way, Professor of Clinical Pharmacology and Global Health, also at IDI. And on the extreme end, I have Rita Nachijoba, who is a research coordinator and PhD scholar, milk studies, also at the Infectious Disease Institute. So the information they are sharing comes from expertise. There is absolutely nothing to question. You must be able to take in and improve the quality of life for your baby and ultimately yourself, because a healthy mother is equal to a healthy baby. Now, let me delve on matters that are also very pivotal to the health of the baby: nutrition. We do know that food itself is medicine. And many times, if you have undertaken a very rigorous and controlled nutrition regime, many people would love to call them meal plans, you could be able to stave off so many diseases, both you as a mother and the baby. I do not know whether nutrition is also an aspect you are studying in order to ensure that before these mothers go for off-the-counter medicines, they are able to embark on a nutrition regime that allows them to stay healthy and, of course, be able to give their babies the very best possible breast milk. Let me begin with you.
Yeah, so I'll start right from the time when a mother conceives. I'm glad that the government has tried to do a lot of advocacy to encourage women to go for what we call antenatal visits.
Yeah.
And in most healthcare settings, during these antenatal visits, mothers are taught on nutrition. And in fact, closer to their delivery, they are taught on nutrition that will ideally support their breastfeeding, okay? And they are taught how to breastfeed. So nutrition for the baby starts off with nutrition for the mom. Katrina mentioned it earlier about some women who say, I'm not producing enough milk, I'm not producing enough milk. So one, that might be the factor that they're not feeding the baby frequently, but also nutritionally. We always encourage a newborn mother to eat food that is beneficial to her, and that will help her produce enough milk then for the baby. And the interesting thing is most of these foods are not really expensive. We have foods that increase the quantity of milk, that help increase. So you realize we always tell mothers who are breastfeeding to take things like mutula. So those are bitter berries, I believe.
Bitter berries, yeah.
You take porridge.
Berries
You
is
take
katunkuma.
Exactly, yeah, in the local
we
language.
tell them to
Okay.
take mukene,
Yeah.
you know, all those things.
Silverfish.
Silverfish. And so once the mother's nutrition is good, it means she can produce milk
That is right.
that is good. And the interesting thing about breast milk is that it changes over time to suit the needs of the baby also. So the breast milk that produced very early on just after delivery is very different from the breast milk that a 3-month-old will take and a 6-month-old will take. But again, it's just to say that as long as the mother is in a good space nutritionally,
That's right.
the breast milk will be enough and it will be good for the baby.
Okay. Anything to say on that?
I think just generally good balanced diet. I think it may be worth mentioning, although people don't always like it when I say this, but that actually obesity is a problem too. You know, we've spent so many years focusing on undernutrition, making sure we don't have malnourished. But actually, in terms of pregnancy, a lot of complications come when a mother is obese. So I would really urge, just when you're having a sedentary life, you don't need to eat as much as if you're working in the village. It sounds very obvious, but sometimes people don't see. But lots of green leafy vegetables, fruit and vegetable. Go down to Nakawa market and just fill up your bag, and cheap, healthy, easily accessible, affordable, balanced food. Same for mother. And once your child starts taking food, honestly, I had my children in Africa, first in Malawi, then in Uganda. Mangoes, papaya, bananas. This is the place to feed a young child, much easier than in these other high-income settings.
Exactly.
She hints on the kind of foods that you can eat to ensure that the breast milk is flowing and it's also top quality. But then again, there are those who eat processed foods. And they claim sometimes you need to have a change, you know? You cannot, for example, eat only organic food simply because for the 6 months you're thinking about the baby. You need to also imbibe because
once in a while, of course, Uganda style, once in a while. But the way Katrina said, we need to balance.
that's right.
I'll give you an example. Through our community engagements, we went to the northern part of Uganda, and all the babies were very healthy, and all the mothers were very healthy. And when you would look at the community settings, they had usual food, cereals, sorghum, peanuts, beans. Yes, like Ida says, the nutritious food is just below us. It's just ahead of us.
That's right.
It's not eating expensively, but the usual foods that we have in our homes.
Okay.
And I'm glad that Ugandans were embracing taking fruits and vegetables. Yeah, there's a time when I was growing up, people were not so much into vegetables, but these days every family, every home, every market, there are vegetables. And I'm glad that mothers are embracing the advantages we get from vegetables and fruits.
All right, ladies, we are entering the final bend of the discussion on breastfeeding and medication. And for now, I would allow each of you to give us what is more like a wrap. And for other discussions, we usually want a bit of projections on what could happen, but this is not for this particular one. Maybe an outlook. If all these interventions are undertaken successfully and the information taken religiously by those that are supposed to take it, what kind of Uganda or world would you envisage in 10 and 15 years? Let me begin with Ida.
Well, first, I'd like to encourage every mother out there to breastfeed. I have 3 boys, all of whom I've breastfed as much as I could. Right now, my last is almost a year. And it's just the bond you form with your child is immeasurable. You can't pay for that. But if you breastfeed them, if we had a society in which we breastfed all our children, would have are dare to say, more intelligent children with a reduced burden of disease. So less diarrhea, less burden of disease, and also healthier outlook for the mothers. Key point is that breastfeeding, I forgot to mention, also can act as a form of birth control. So if you're breastfeeding exclusively, your body sort of knows there's a baby on the way.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so it acts as a natural form of birth control. And that is why for many of our mothers, our grandmothers, they actually didn't need a form of birth control.
Yeah.
These are women who breastfed children for 2 years
For
almost.
2 years.
And then, so the advantages of breastfeeding are innumerable.
Okay.
And so I'd like to encourage every woman out there.
Katrina?
So perhaps my vision for the future, perhaps taking a slightly different slant that we haven't delved into today, is that breastfeeding mothers and their babies should be prioritized in research, because every community in the world has many breastfeeding women, and many of these will need medication, and the precise medication may change over time. But we need to prioritize getting the data well in a timely manner so that any woman who needs a medication knows exactly what the benefits are, what to be watching out for, is empowered to ask questions and to breastfeed whilst taking her medication. And the world I want to see is where this happens routinely, that nobody ever says, we do not do the research because they're a special group, that it's actually done proactively. And the exciting thing is Uganda is right front and centre and leading the way in actually that change, and I feel very proud of that.
Okay. Rita, your last word.
So my vision is to see breastfeeding seen as a team effort. Like we've said, a breastfeeding mother will need support from their partner.
That's right.
Yes, something we've forgotten to talk about today. Our partner is key in leading the mother to breastfeed their baby very well. Once a mother is stressed a bit, say from a relationship with a partner, this will somehow protect the breast milk. So it should be a team to encourage a breastfeeding mother to support them in this journey of breastfeeding. So it should be a team effort.
All right, thank you very much, Rita Nachijova, Research Coordinator, PhD Scholar in Milk Studies at the Infectious Disease Institute. And many thanks to you too. Katrina White, you are Professor of Clinical Pharmacology as well as Global Health, also at IDI. And on my immediate left, Ida Kauma Tusime, she is a pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic modeler at the Infectious Disease Institute. Ladies, it's been emboldening, all the information that you have shared. I'm sure that out there, mothers, young women, and everyone else that needs to know now has a good idea of how things should be. As we depart, I'd like to encourage all men, as Rita Nachijova has said, if you are stressing a breastfeeding mother, please stop it, because you are affecting the quality of breast milk that your baby is going to get. Suspend the stressors and ensure that there is harmony and tranquility in the home. It's been a pleasure for this particular broadcast, Breastfeeding and Medication, brought to you by the Infectious Disease Institute, that is undertaking a lot of interventions across the country in as far as public health is concerned. I'm Chris Higeni. Have yourselves a good day.